So I think we are due for some positive thinking, some optimistic thinking. I was in synagogue yesterday and someone approached me who's an audience member. He watches this channel. He told me he watches the channel every day and that it depresses him too often. And I said to him, well, it depresses me too. But, because especially lately, ever since these extensions of the ceasefire and talk of a deal with the Iranian regime that would throw them a lifeline. And I've been very clear-eyed about my criticisms of where things are going. And it's easy to get a little too negative because in this whole process, if you think all the way back to the beginning of the Trump administration and everything we've been through, every time we take two steps forward and then one step back, we can't panic every time there's a one step back. I mean, yes, we create problems for ourselves, and it would be a terrible tragedy if we gave a lifeline to the regime and allowed them to survive. But even if we gave a lifeline to the regime and allowed it to survive, which would be a grave mistake, that doesn't mean that the story ends there. There's a lot of ways that things can still play out, and President Trump has come through and made the right decision so many times that I guess he's earned a certain measure of our trust. That said, again, the problems that we point out here on this channel are real. What I want to do in this video is I want to talk about an interview. I want to show you a few things that Victor Davis Hanson said in an interview that was done a few days ago by Stephen Gardner. Stephen Gardner has a very successful YouTube channel, very successful podcast. And I'm just going to play you a short clip of Victor Davis Hanson being interviewed by Stephen. I think I'll stop it at a couple points. And it made me think. So here we go. Here's
people will not accept the fact that we don't control the uranium. They have to do that. Either seal it or destroy it or go take it, because they're never going to negotiate that away. So I can see what Trump was worried about. Everything was so touchy, and he's basically saying to us, there hasn't been a war for almost 5 weeks, 6 weeks. It's longer than the actual war. So the real war was only 42. It was wonderful. We did all this, and now we're just negotiating. But at some point, he's got to see that you can't trust these people. They're dragging it out to get closer to the midterms and close that window of opportunity. Because I think they know, and the left here knows, and the European left knows, that the fundamentals of the economy, the jobs report, the stock market, the GDP growth, they're all pretty solid, and the foreign investment is at record levels. And all these new technologies are starting to streamline the economy. And we've cut a lot of federal employees, and there's a lot less illegal immigration. The crime rate is way down, historically down. So everything is there except this oil, at $100 a barrel. If he can get it down to 60, and that means he has to emasculate Iran, and he's got to make sure the strait is open and the uranium is accounted for. And that's what he's trying to negotiate with. And I think, from what I've talked to people, I think there's a growing realization that you cannot talk to these people and get the uranium back. And I was saying to my wife the other day, Friday afternoon will be a 4-day news blackout because of Memorial Day. If I were him and I thought that I had come to that conclusion, I would just do it Friday afternoon when it's dark in Iran and do it for 4 days and go full blast and get it out of the news and get it over, and then just take one carrier group, and it's going to be auditing and get everybody home and open the strait, militarily open it. Blast anything on the sea, anything in the air, destroy their docks, their ports, and then bring the U.S. military through to patrol it, and then tell everybody it's safe and come in. And I think it will be dramatic if he can do that, the fall. I think he's right about that part, the fall of oil prices. Because there's a lot of there's a lot of speculators who thought that it was going to go to 200 or 150, and they bought at futures. And if we're awash in oil, like I think we will be, that will crash, and they'll want to unload it as quickly as possible on these tankers and other storage facilities. So we'll see, but that's where he is right now. Strategically.
Okay, I want to talk about this. What he says there about the oil prices. I was looking at oil prices earlier today. Oh, there's my map of the Hormuz Strait. We'll get to that in a minute. And when there was news of a deal, so this is from yesterday, before America started attacking those locations in the Strait of Hormuz, those defensive attacks, we saw this headline: oil prices dip amid optimism over potential US-Iran deal. And if you take a look, this is the graph of oil over the last year. If we bring it down to just the last month, you can see that this here is yesterday and today, and and this drop here is from last Tuesday, when everyone started getting optimistic about there being a deal. Oil prices started dropping really fast, and especially over the course of the last day, they've been dropping because of the potential for a deal. But if you zoom in a little bit closer, you see here that this is from late last night, and then they start creeping up again. There's been here, let's take a look at the 1 day graph. The single day graph actually sees oil prices rising. And that has to do with the fact that when America started attacking these sites in the Strait of Hormuz, and it looked like maybe there isn't going to be a deal because hostilities are ramping up again, everyone starts getting skittish. So literally, you could track this war. I mean, if you go back to the graph of the year, so here, right here, this is where the war gets launched. Right here, right before it starts shooting up. And then right here at the peak, this is April 7th. The ceasefire goes into effect April 8th. And then it starts dropping precipitously. And it's just literally, you can track the price of oil with how things are going. And what I was thinking about as I was listening to Victor Davis Hanson talking here, because again, you see this: European stocks fall, oil rises after U.S. strikes in Iran. That's from this morning, after the strikes in Iran. And as Victor Davis Hanson was talking, and he raised a very interesting point. The reason that oil prices are high is not because oil isn't being pumped. It isn't because there's a scarcity of oil. There's lots and lots of oil. It's just, it's stuck. It can't move. The Straits of Hormuz are closed. And we also saw during the course of the last couple months, the UAE pulling out of OPEC, and OPEC is a price fixing scheme. And that means that the UAE wants to produce more oil than they were producing before and potentially sell it at lower prices and not be stuck in the OPEC price fixing scheme. The United States is pumping more oil than ever. The Venezuela situation is also producing tremendous amounts of oil. So there's actually plenty of oil. It's just there's a problem of it moving. So as soon as the Straits of Hormuz situation gets solved, there's going to be a tremendous amount of oil, and oil is actually going to plummet. Now, this leads us back to the political issue, which is what Victor Davis Hanson suggests here is he says, listen, just rip the Band-Aid off. Just go in, find an opportune time, sooner the better, and just go in guns blazing and sort this out. And the faster you do it, the better. And then you just put it behind you. There'll be a massive spike in oil prices while you're doing the action. But if you do it nice and quick, oil will then plummet. And that's where Trump is kind of hamstringing himself a little bit. He wants to keep the prices of oil down. And part of the reason he doesn't want to carry out military action is because he doesn't want the price going back up. But what he's doing now in this kind of, game of chicken with the Iranians and going and stringing things along and hoping to get a deal, and the Iranians drive a tough bargain, and is the situation really solved, or is it not solved, and are the straits open, or are they not open? This is actually going to cause these fluctuations that we've been seeing, the type of fluctuations we see here when we look at the 1 month chart. And maybe Trump is getting the message that he's got to take matters into his own hands and just get the straits open. And that's why I was feeling optimistic this morning when you see that he's opening the straits. We didn't see that. I mean, let's see what happens during the course of the day. But if Trump is saying, we're going to forcibly open the Straits of Hormuz, or at the very least, these attacks sent the message to the regime that he's willing to take kinetic action to get them open. Because as I explained, just in case you didn't see that video, you should watch it. What we were told in today's headlines, that these were defensive strikes because they were laying mines. It's true, they were laying mines in the Strait of Hormuz. But the Americans called them defensive strikes. They sort of were, but let's look at where they struck. Besides striking boats that were laying mines, the locations that were listed in the more in-depth news reporting about these strikes from yesterday was that they struck Bandar Abbas, which is up here. They struck, and besides Bandar Abbas, they struck Jask, which is down here, which is right opposite the Fujairah and Corfacan ports, which take the UAE, the Emirati oil that comes across through the pipeline from the west to the east to bypass the Straits of Hormuz. The Jask missile launching sites were struck last night because they were designed to disrupt the Emirati shipments of oil, and they also struck right here. Let me find this spot here. Up on here. Yeah, here it is. This spot right here. Sikri. That's where they struck that also. So they struck these sites here, meaning, and they also struck this, there were also explosions heard right around this island. This is Larak Island, which is, if you see where this island is and this island is, this is the narrowest spot in the Strait of Hormuz. So it seems to me that what the Americans were actually doing by striking Jask, sorry, it was Sirik, Jask, Sirik is right here, and Bandar Abbas, striking these missile launching sites and also going after the boats laying mines, is that they were putting the Iranians on notice that they're willing to forcibly take out the threats that are keeping the Straits of Hormuz closed. And that makes me think that if Trump just goes ahead and moves forward with this type of action, we could see the Straits of Hormuz open sooner rather than later. And once they get open, the price of oil should be dropping pretty rapidly. And that's a good thing. So that gave me some reason for optimism. And now there's another interesting point that's made in this discussion. Let's take a look at it.
It's got to be resolved militarily. Tactically, it was resolved. We destroyed their military. We suffered very little casualties. It was a brilliant military campaign, but we haven't transferred or translated that military victory, overwhelming though it was, into strategic advantage and resolution yet. We're on the way there, but we have pressures. He decided to go before the midterms. That was very courageous, but that thing is ticking. And if he loses the House and the Senate, he's not going to be able to appoint a judge. He's not going to be able to get any legislation. It's going to be all by what Barack Obama called phone and pen. I got a phone, I got a pen, and executive orders, and it's going to be tricky.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate your analysis, because as I've been studying it, that's kind of what I'm looking at, is like militarily absolutely destroyed them. I've had people, out at dinner tell me, the U.S. military is losing. And I'm like, are you kidding me? 10% of our military wiped out 100% of their Air Force and Navy within a week.
Yeah.
You're just mad about gas prices. And they're like, well, yeah, I guess I'm just mad about gas prices. So, and I've also wondered, does it make sense to just, bomb the hell out of the uranium site and then say, we're going to put Space Force on it because it's cheaper than, sitting there doing this and then move on.
Absolutely. I think that's exactly right. You bomb all you can in Pike Mountain or wherever you determine it is, and then you've got wonderful reconnaissance, and it's like mowing the lawn. You say, you know what, I see trucks there, I see people trying, I'm going to send some people from Kansas on a B-2. And you can do that. They have no air defenses. And even when they had them, the Chinese air defenses were not very good, and they can break them. And I think they can do it in 5 or 6 days. I think they can leave the oil storage intact and just get rid of the ports and the cranes so they can't unload it. And then if the Berlin Wall fell in '89, it took 2 to 3 months for most of the European countries to throw out the communist governments. It took the Soviet Union 2 years. But that was the creation of that liberation, was the fall of the wall. And I think once everybody in Iran sees how bad it is, and they see that these crazy people want to resume, $10 billion a year to the Houthis and the Hamas and Hezbollah Arab terrorists, and they want to rebuild all of this stuff. It's $500 billion over 50 years has been gone up in smoke. I don't think the people will like that. And so they're going to have hard times, and we'll see if they can control it next time.
Okay. So did you catch the optimism there? Let me explain. Both on the issue of the uranium and on the issue of the regime eventually falling, Victor Davis Hanson points out, and Stephen Gardner also initially pointed out, that you don't necessarily need to bring down the regime now. You don't necessarily need to take the uranium out. Let's remember, Iran has no air defenses, and the Americans aren't going away. Trump is going to leave military assets there until this thing is really, really, really totally resolved, and maybe for a long time. The Israelis still have freedom of operation in the airspace above Iran. And if, as Stephen said, if you just bomb the sites where the uranium is, and then you surveil the area with satellites, with Space Force, you keep a watchful eye over it, the Iranians have no air defenses. Now you have to prevent them from rebuilding their air defenses, and they're going to try to rebuild them. They're already claiming that they're rebuilding their air defenses. They probably, I don't know what they're getting from the Chinese or the Russians, but we certainly have the ability right now to keep a watchful eye over it. And the same goes for the fall of the regime. You know, if the people of Iran rise up at some point, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months from now, a year from now, and as Victor Davis Hanson said, the Soviet Union fell, you know, it took some time for it to happen, but it was all the result of the victory of the Cold War. It took some time to play out. So what he's arguing here is it doesn't all have to happen right now as a result of as a direct result of the policy decisions that are made in the course of this war. But if they're degraded, if they don't have air defenses, if they're battered, and we have a watchful eye over them, we're still, we can still, police them. Their ability to suppress their people, their ability to do another slaughter of their people and get away with it is limited, to say the least. The chances that the regime survives after this are not what they were before. Meaning they're so weakened that the process has already been set in motion. That's what he's telling us here. And we have to keep that in mind. I'm not saying we know what will happen. And I know it might be strange for you to hear me being optimistic, but we have to keep in mind that the story doesn't end just because we say the war is over, or just because Trump says we're done, or whatever it is. The story doesn't end there. The situation's always dynamic. Look, the 12-day war happened in June. And after the 12-day war, Trump lifted sanctions on them and he allowed them to sell their oil. And we were like, oh my gosh, what is he doing? And then what happened? 6 months later, the Iranian people took to the streets and almost brought the regime down, which led to this. So it could take longer or it could take shorter, whatever it is. But we've done so much damage to them, and we have the ability to keep a watchful eye. We have control of the skies. There's a lot of reason to be optimistic, even if we're not getting everything we want. And even if, again, admittedly, as I've been pointing out, even if Trump is making some decisions that are making it more difficult and dragging things out, there's not necessarily a reason to be too pessimistic. So I will continue to give you my clear-eyed analysis of what is going on. And again, have to assess what we're seeing in front of us and be critical where necessary and point out the warning signs. I will continue, of course, to do that. But let's keep our spirits up and realize that when I say we, I mean Israel, that's where I live, but also the West, the world. We are in a far better position now than we were before this war started. Yes, the price of oil is high, but we are in a far better position now. And even if everything ended right now and we'd be like, oh my gosh, the regime is still intact, this is terrible, we're in a better position now than we were before. And the same is true with the degradation of Hamas and Hezbollah. If we think back to before October 7th, yes, we need to finish the job. It's very important that we do so. But let's keep a level head and keep ourselves, keep our feet on the ground. Thank God, lots of progress is being made. Yes, there are some things we want to do a little bit differently, but things are still good. So let's keep our spirits up. God bless.